Excited about tonight and our guest as we're on live. This is Alex from Tropical Acres Farms, and we're going to take a Q&A, live Q&A. So if you have questions, the best way to post them is in the side chat. So post those in the side chat and we'll get to as many questions as we can. If you have a dire need for a question that you must get answered, Super Chat is open as well. So even if you give a nickel, it'll highlight your comment. So go ahead and do that. And I'm really excited about this and this coming mango season. I made a 2 hour, no, maybe an hour and a half mango video today, and then the camera messed up. It didn't come out. So I need something to make me feel better. So we got the Mango Man here, Alex. I'm going to put his links below, everybody. So check out those links below. And and here we go. So Alex, before we take any questions, tell us, give us an update on the farm and what's happening.
Right now, we have a small number of trees that actually have developing fruit on them for the coming year. Some of that actually is going to be off-season fruit, technically speaking. Some of it will be spring mangoes. And then we have quite a few trees. I don't know what percentage of the orchard, but it's a lot that are beginning to flower. Their tips are swelling up, and we know that from historical experience that this is going to be inflorescence coming out of them rather than vegetative growth. So we are looking forward to over the next couple of weeks seeing a lot of flowers on the trees. It won't be a 100% bloom. There will be quite a few holdouts. That's just based on how much cool weather that we have experienced over the prior 2 or 3 weeks or so, as well as like how old those stem tips are on the trees. But it will be a significant bloom, and I would expect to have a decent amount of spring mangoes from that as long as we take good care of it. Um, and as long as some natural disaster doesn't occur between now and then. Unfortunately, we've received a lot of wind and some rain in the last several days that has kind of interrupted our activities at the farm a little bit. Um, Hopefully that will go away soon, and hopefully we will get some additional cold fronts rolling through either in the latter half of this month or in January or February to ignite the rest of our trees that do not flower in this wave to go ahead and flower. Um, and that way we'll end up with a complete crop. So that's where we're at right now at the farm in West Palm Beach.
Okay, the wind and the rain, how is that affecting the what's going on the farm? Does it affect it at all, or is it just not
Yeah,
non-relevant?
there's some effect. Both are undesirable, but for different reasons. Um, Well, actually, for one of the same reasons. For one, it limits my ability to spray the trees, and I'm trying to give them nutrition and stuff at this point in time. I'm a little behind schedule because of some labor issues and whatnot. So when it's windy, I mean like really windy, and it's been gusting into the 30s. That's very, very windy. It's too windy for us to spray in those conditions. In addition to that, if it's rainy and the trees are getting wet, the leaves are getting wet, um, and the flowers and the small fruits are getting wet, then your product isn't going to adhere like you want it to. So anyway, unfortunate weather. Not necessarily surprising because we've experienced that kind of stuff, especially the rain. Even though it's our dry season here in South Florida, our dry season is not as well defined as it is in the rest of the tropical world. Um, you know, Other countries, they will go months and months without a drop of rain. Here, that's pretty rare. We did have a pretty nice dry November, though, and that really gave us an assist on the trees that are flowering at this point. They responded very well to that. So we want dry weather and we want cool weather, and hopefully cool weather that will span several weeks rather than just 5 or 6 days, which has been kind of the trend in recent years that our cold fronts are rather brief. So we want cold fronts optimally spanning a couple weeks in time where the temperatures at night are getting into the 50s or 40s. But at least at a minimum 10 plus days would be great. So I guess we can't get too greedy these days with the how mild our winters are. So
Okay. Well, we got speaking of which, our first question here is when should we begin to spray sulfur to curb the establishment of powdery mildew?
you should start doing that when you start seeing panicles visibly emerging from the stems of your trees. Um, like I'm gonna say like a couple inches of emergence. Okay. If your buds are just swelling up or your stems are still dormant, there's really not much of a point in applying sulfur unless you have a foliar powdery mildew problem. So I usually wait until uh, they're really starting to come out. Now, in our situation, we have so many trees and so many varieties that there are some that are a little further behind schedule. Um, some people would perhaps prefer to not have to spray one tree and then have to spray three trees the next week and so forth. Maybe they want to limit how many applications they're going to do. So you might give some other trees some time to start to catch up a little bit before making your first application. If you've only got like one tree where the panicles have emerged a good amount. But you definitely want to have that on them before the flowers have opened up optimally because that's going to really suppress the pathogen. So, like, while the panicles are still emerging, before the spikes, if you will, have completely emerged, you should have already made a sulfur application.
Okay. And how many throughout the year or throughout the season?
Uh, you really only need to apply it. And by the way, I just spoke to sulfur, okay? But you don't have to use sulfur if you're trying to prevent powdery mildew. In fact, there's quite a few other products that will suppress it. And typically you only need to choose one of these products. Um, and some of them you don't want to mix with sulfur, by the way. So like I'm talking about sulfur in this case, but you don't have to use sulfur. Um, how many applications is going to depend on how many varieties you're growing, how many trees in total. I usually end up having to do way more than I want to because there's always lagging trees that their panicles take longer to push out. And you really should be spraying the sulfur until the fruit have set on most of the panicles. At that point, powdery mildew is unlikely to harm you. But anything in between, it can. So we usually try to aim to do an application every 7 to 10 days. Anything beyond that, you usually lose some of your efficacy from the product pretty quickly. Anything quicker than that, you're just wasting product. So, uh, if you're lucky and you time it right, you can probably get away with as few as three applications if you're doing them every 10 days or so. Um, but that it never works that way for me. Like I always end up having to do 4 or 5 applications spanning over the course of almost well more than a month. Not to mention that we'll probably have a second bloom, and then we'll be spraying those trees at a later date and time. So just know that one application is not going to be enough. A lot of times two won't be enough. But for some people, three might be adequate to provide complete protection. Now, you might not spray your trees at all, and you might not get any powdery mildew. You might get, well, I won't say lucky, but like you might not get any. Last year, a lot of people got it, and it was very devastating to the Florida mango crop in general. So you should have a plan for controlling it, and you should have your product, whatever that happens to be, whether that's sulfur or horticultural oil or millstop or whatever, you should have it on hand before the trees are flowering. Because if you don't, you're setting yourself up for the possibility that you won't have applied it on time because your busy life, interfered with your ability to spray your trees. So Same thing with having a sprayer ready to go, um, and that kind of thing. So have a plan.
Okay, all right. Well, we got a question here from Central Florida grower saying, I have recently been looking into adding Basenolide and Gibberellic acid to my foliar spray routine. Info on both is hard to find. Do you have any suggestions?
Brasinolide and gibberellic acid. Okay. Um, so I don't use brasinolide. Now that doesn't mean that it's bad or anything. It's just that I use so many products that like there's only so many things I want to apply, right? Um, Gibberellic acid is one of those things I've used it before. You have to be careful with it, okay? Because it's one of those things that's very easy to over apply. Um, and if you apply too much of it, it will actually inhibit the tree's flowering. In fact, I've used it for that purpose before because it will delay the bud break. So what happens is GA3 is a plant hormone, gibberellic acid, naturally occurring. And so when you apply this stuff to the tree, um, it can have a positive effect in terms of optimizing production and fruit quality and things of that sort. But when you apply too much of it, it can cause the trees to A, delay their bud break, and that's like often used for that purpose. And then therefore, like let's suppose that you got your cold front, right, and your trees are getting ready to flower, or will be getting ready to flower soon. And you apply GA3, and the trees that you apply it to maybe don't flower right away. It delays their bud break by a couple weeks. Well, when the bud break actually occurs, the cold front's gone, and then you get vegetation instead. It can happen. I'm not saying that it will. The other thing about it, though, is that it has a tendency to make the trees, when they do flush vegetative growth, produce really elongated shoots. Um, so for some people that might be a good thing, but for somebody like me that wants to control the tree's size in the long run, I don't want that. So I've used gibberellic acid for certain applications in the past, and I do use it for certain things currently, but I don't apply it to all my trees. If you do use it for that purpose, for what I think you want to use it for, you want to keep that parts per million number under 100. And you might even want it like under 50. I'm kind of forgetting because like I said, I don't use it that often, and I don't use it for the purpose of trying to increase the yield of my crop. But so there, that's about all I can give you. I would definitely pay close attention to the recommendations of any product that you purchase. There's going to be different grades of gibberellic acid, different percentages, so that factors in as well. Probably the same thing with brasinolide, but like I said, I've not used it, so I can't give you any advice on that. I don't
Okay,
know what to say about those.
okay. How soon after a 2 week cold snap will you likely to see blooms?
Um, the response from the trees is usually going to be seen within 2 to 3 weeks following a cold front. Now, they need something to spark them to initiate shoots. Sometimes that's a rain event, sometimes that's warmer weather. Part of that can be the stage of the moon. A waxing gibbous moon is more desirable for trying to achieve bloom because the moon is going from a smaller stage to a more full stage, and that tends to result in a higher percentage of bloom occurring. So some of that is just timing up to Mother Nature, if you will. But generally, if you're going to see a response from them, it's going to be within 2 to 3 weeks. Some varieties will spring right to it even faster than 2 weeks, like something like a Rosa or a Dwarf Hawaiian You can see a response within a week, sometimes very quick. But for other varieties, it's going to take a little longer than that. But and beyond once you get beyond 3 weeks, they kind of forget that the cold front occurred. So
Okay. Next one is, have we gotten enough cold to stimulate the majority of the varieties in South Florida to start flowering?
no, we've gotten enough cold to get about probably half of them to flower. Or I mean, like, are we going to count like partial blooms? Then maybe partial blooms are, going to occur on a lot of trees, but I look for complete blooms. And in South Florida, we got about 6 nights here below 60, where the low was falling to the 50s or the 40s. Maybe it was 7, I don't remember. But historically speaking, that's enough to get most of the easy flowering varieties to go, some amount of the medium difficulty varieties to flower, generally on their older, more mature stems. If they've got like fresher stuff that hardened off in like October or whatever, that might not initiate. Um, so we're gonna see a decent bloom that will result in spring fruit, but it's not gonna be everything. If I was to go out there right now, I could still find plenty of trees that have dormant tips. I could find a lot that are getting ready to go, but like it's hard for me to say that most of them, or at least not the vast majority of them, are going to flower. Maybe around half or something like that at most. But um, I would guess that even a lot of those ones that we go out and look at and see swelling buds on, we're only going to see it on part of the canopy. So it'll be a partial response, and hopefully the fruit set is good, and the retention's good, and a lot of people will at least get some amount of fruit. But my guess is that come January, we're still going to be hoping for an additional bloom on quite a few trees. And I'm optimistic that we'll get it. So,
Okay. Next one, really good question. Why hasn't Atlas come up with his own name varieties?
okay. So I've been asked this a lot in my career. Um, And the short answer is that I have so many that are varieties that already exist that haven't been properly evaluated, that deserve more attention or whatever, that it's hard for me to justify coming up with new ones right now. That isn't to say that there isn't a temptation on my part to introduce new varieties, um, but I would like, if I'm going to name mangoes, other than like chance seedlings that people bring to my attention, and there's been some of that, but not a whole lot. I would like to do controlled hybrids who have a purpose, um, to accomplish. So like I want to find varieties that are ultra early or ultra late, or varieties that we don't have very many of in a certain flavor category. For example, we have very limited numbers of coconut flavored mangoes and citrus flavored mangoes. So, like any project where I'm going to be naming new varieties, I want that to be specific to trying to bring something to the market that's needed. Um, whether that's more really, really early stuff or really, really late stuff, more dwarf varieties for those that have limited space, um, and that requires a lot of effort and a lot of time. Uh, and perhaps I'll get to a point someday where I do think I'm able to do that or have, the opportunity to do that. Um, so I think programs like that need to be well designed. And so I'd like to like spend some years, if you will, preparing for that before I even embark on doing it. So perhaps someday I will do something like that, but not right yet. I still have plenty of stuff that I'm still trying to, shine attention to and evaluate. We have trees that we just recently planted that we're going to be studying over the next several years. Um, so I'm looking forward to that before I ever get into doing my own breeding program.
Okay. Another question, it says, there are people on the tropical fruit farm looking for 3 and 7 gallon USDA hemp cigar trees and can't find any in South Florida nurseries. And it's more of a comment, but do you want to say anything about that?
Okay, USDA Himsagar is a late season mango that is one of those ones that deserves more attention, actually. So just as I mentioned in the last question, you have all these varieties that not too many people know much about, and its name is terrible. Um, it was supposed to be the Himsagar of West Bengal of India, and it's not. It's something else. So we took to calling it USDA Himsagar. I've also called it Lahore Himsagar because the budwood was supposedly brought from Lahore, Pakistan. I now doubt that a little bit too. Anyway, we graft this tree, okay? If you wanted to order it from us, we can graft it for you. Um, I don't have too many in stock, if at all. Might have zero in stock. I'm not sure. My wife would be the one to know that answer because she knows the inventory. But um, there isn't a lot of demand for it. And it's not because the mango isn't good, okay? It's a very good, classically flavored late season mango. I would say almost I would say it's a classically flavored mango, but it's like it's better than most of the later season mangoes. And it's kind of a slow growing tree. I have one in my own backyard. We have a couple of them at the farm in West Palm, but just not something that a lot of people have inquired about. The name, it sucks. It just doesn't, draw people's attention. You put USDA on something and it's like, people just go, what's that? So, but if you want to order them from us, we can make them and they'll be ready by next fall as 1 gallon plants. If you want to inquire and see if we have it, you can shoot us an email, but I'm not sure if we do or not. I don't want to claim that we have it available right now. It's one of those mangoes that we graft less than 15 of probably most years, which isn't a lot, so mostly for graft requests and stuff.
Okay. Another question is, in zone 10, Southwest Florida, I have more dieback on my avocado trees than my mango trees. Should I use a specific type of soil, or are there any soil nutrients I can add to stop dieback on my avocado trees?
Yeah, dieback is a big problem with avocado trees in South Florida. Now, hopefully, your trees aren't infected with laurel wilt, because if they are, they're goners. Um, that's a disease that severely impacts avocado trees, unfortunately. But hopefully, you're not dealing with that, and it's more just the typical poor response to some avocado trees to our sandy soil in South Florida. Um, we actually have issues with avocado trees too for that reason. It's nutritionally related. They require a lot more nutritional care than mango trees do. So you want to give them organic matter in the form of mulch, compost to help amend your soil. You want to give them plenty of NPK fertilizer, much more than you would give a mango tree. The University of Florida has a very good guide, avocado growing in the Florida home landscape, that has a great schedule and recommendation for nutritional care for avocados. But the bottom line is they require a lot more of everything. Very common for them to get deficiencies of potassium, uh, deficiencies of boron, of manganese and iron. Those occur a lot, and if they get enough of that going on in the soil, they will die back, and then they'll grow back again as the levels of those nutrients become more available during certain parts of the year due to rainfall and stuff like that. But they kind of go in through a cycle of that. It's very frustrating. So you need to be prepared to apply a lot of nutrition to your avocado trees down here if you expect them to thrive. So lots of mulch, lots of compost. Um, You want to give them a good NPK fertilizer. They don't really respond that well to nutritional sprays, unfortunately. There's some good studies done, I think, in South Africa or Australia about that. But you can drench them with nutritional products, and it can help. So,
Okay, another question is, can you talk about mango malformation disease and gummosis in mango trees? What are they and how would you treat them?
okay. Mm, Mango malformation disease is a very unfortunate, nasty disease that is a Fusarium species of fungi, which are some of the most difficult to control on planet Earth. Um, this disease is very common in the Middle East, in Egypt. It's very common in India and Pakistan now. What it is basically it causes either, depending on what form of it, the vegetation or the inflorescence to come out bunched like cauliflower or something. And then the the flowers don't really set fruit very well when that happens, and it's just nasty, and it's very hard to get rid of. Well, I shouldn't say it's hard to get rid of, but like you can't just spray it with fungicide and think it's going to go away. It does exist in Florida. Okay, it's definitely is in Florida. Luckily, it's not too widespread. Um, but you might encounter it once in a while, and it basically gets spread by infected pruning material. So, like, you prune a tree with a instrument that has malformation, and it spreads to that tree, and then from that point forward, as the tree grows, that new branch is infected with malformation. Now, the interesting thing about malformation is it does not go backward. It's not a systemic disease, it's a topical disease. So, if you've got a tree that has it, you can try spraying fungicide and stuff, and it might help mitigate its spread a little bit. But, like, the best thing you can do depends on the size of the tree. But, like, in some instances, you can just cut the branch off below the point of infection, and then you dispose of the branch. You don't keep it around. And then what grows back is healthy and does not have the disease. But if it were me and I encountered it, I would just burn the tree. Meaning I would extract it out of the ground and I would set it on fire, or haul it off and put it in the dump or something, because I wouldn't want it around. Um, it's like I said, it's a serious issue in other countries more so than here in Florida, but definitely exists here. You need to look up pictures of it to kind of see what it looks like. And sometimes you'll get inflorescence on a healthy mango tree that almost looks like it could be malformation, and it's not. It's just kinked a little bit, or malformation has a very particular look to it, and it's very easy to identify from a trained eye. Gummosis is usually caused by some kind of internal infection. A lot of times it's caused by bacterial infection from Xanthomonas species. Uh, it can also happen due to trauma. So, like when a mango tree gets cold damage, it's not unusual to see gummosis emerging from the wood. But most of the time, in a healthy tree or relatively otherwise healthy tree that has not experienced any cold damage, it's due to a bacterial infection of some sort. Sometimes viral infections too, but usually here it's going to be bacterial. And then you're going to probably want to treat it with some antibacterial agents. So,
Okay, next question is from Ryan. He says, can you speak a little about Zill 312 and Lady's Choice? How's the disease resistance, productivity, and taste compared to the East Indian mango?
okay, yeah, sure, I can speak to both of those. Zell 3-12 was a kit seedling, and the parentage was probably a hybrid. It was probably a hybrid of kit and the East Indian. That's what Gary Zill told me a long time ago. It looks like a little kit mango, like I don't know, well under a pound, but like physically, it looks like a kit. Just looks like the smallest kit you've ever seen. Uh, but it doesn't taste like kit. It's more of an Indian, West Indian type flavor. It is a very late season mango, and it appears to be pretty productive. For some people, they might view that fruit as a little unacceptably small, but doesn't bother me. Has a very thin seed, a little bit of fiber, nothing ridiculous, but there is some there. It's not like a totally fiber-free mango. Uh, the other one, Lady's Choice, that was an East Indian seedling, and that one makes a lot of fruit for us. Very productive tree, kind of slow growing. It's not very big for when we planted it. Um, it's prolific and it flowers very easily every year. Um, it it does seem to get less disease than East Indian does. It gets less anthracnose specifically. It gets a little bacterial spot, but not as bad as East Indian either. My issue with Lady's Choice is that it's delicious. Okay, it's got a very fine Indian West Indian type flavor. It's got a lot of similarities to East Indian from a flavor standpoint. The fruit come out so small, so small that like it takes like three of them to make a pound sometimes. Like that's kind of frustrating from the standpoint of a person who sells the mango. But from somebody who's eating them out of their backyard, that's a different story, right? Um, but I would sooner plant it over East Indian. Now, how will it do? How if you take Lady's Choice out to a real humid area, how will it perform? I'm not sure. I never grew it when I was in Loxahatchee. I've only grown it in West Palm Beach. The 312, we have one of the only fruiting trees. I imagine Gary still has his. I don't think we've sold that many of them. We've sold probably like 10 of them or something. Nobody asks for it. It's very good, but we haven't sold a lot of the fruit. I'm guilty of not promoting it enough. I'll say that. It deserves more evaluation, but it's so hard without secondary trees elsewhere. And with only one tree in our possession, in fact, it's half of a tree because it's a top work. It's hard for me to make any prognosis on how it will perform relative to East Indian, um, in other places. But if I were to wager a guess, it'll probably do better because just about everything can do a little better than East Indian with how anthracnose prone it is and just generally disease prone it is in Florida's conditions. So there's quite a few mangoes I would plant over East Indian, but we still have to make a lot of East Indian trees for our Jamaican customers that want to grow it. So,
Okay. Another question from Artful Watcher 3 says, a few years ago, Fruitful Trees had a video at Alex's house in which his collection focused on Pickering, Angie, and Sugarloaf. Would Alex make any changes to these as his big three?
okay, those trees were trees that I planted as temporary trees in between my permanent trees in my yard. I I guess I have like 15 or so varieties in my backyard, maybe more, slightly more. My yard isn't enormous. I live on a small piece of land, but um, I chose those varieties as the temporary trees mostly because they were smaller trees that fruited pretty quickly. Um, so if I was doing that over again, would I do it differently? Well, I'd certainly still plant the Angies and Pickerings. Um, I don't know if I would plant as many Sugarloaves as I did. I think that had more to do with the fact that I just happened to have a lot of Sugarloaf trees in my nursery at the time. And I just was like, well, let me try planting some more of these. Because at the farm in West Palm Beach, I only used a couple of temporary Sugarloaf trees for interplanting for the ultra high density stuff. I did a lot more Honeykiss and Rosy Gold and Dwarf Hawaiian. So from that perspective, no, I wouldn't do it differently. I would have chosen those same varieties because they were so successful in that interplanting temporary tree situation. We did great with those. So, no. But in my own backyard, Just from a yield perspective, um, I might have planted a few honeykiss instead of as many sugarloaves as I did plant. Um, but I still have sugarloaf in my backyard. I'm very happy with it. It's just it grows a little more vigorously than Angie and Pickering do. Although I probably would favor it from a flavor perspective over the two. But I like all those mangoes. So
Okay. If you graft a seedling scion onto an established mango tree, trying to get a new variety, would you get fruit sooner than the time it would take for that seedling to grow and produce fruit?
most likely, yes, that's what David Sturrock did. David Sturrock, who used to own the land at the farm in West Palm Beach, now his grandson Jack owns it. Um, he did exactly that. He planted seedling mango trees, didn't want to wait, you know, 10 years in some cases for them to fruit, wanted to get them evaluated a little quicker. So his theory was that if he took, now what he did, he didn't take scions from these seedlings. He literally took the seedling itself and approach grafted it, wired it to mature fruiting trees. But you can take scions potentially from your potted seedling or in-ground seedling or whatever and graft it onto a mature tree that's fruiting. And it should cause the seedling to flower quicker than it otherwise would. It certainly worked for David Sturrock. The Duncan mango flowered in 2 years from seed, which is an amazing. In Florida, that's an amazing accomplishment. Now, my understanding is that kind of thing can happen in California with some regularity. But here, it's very rare for a mango tree to flower when it's like less than 5 years of age from seed. Now, of course, grafted trees flower a lot quicker than that, but seedling mangoes are usually in the ballpark of 5 to 8 years before they start flowering and fruiting here in South Florida. So if you take scions from your seedling and graft them to a mature tree, a grafted tree, or a fruiting tree, whatever, you can probably expect it to flower earlier than it otherwise would. Now, does that mean it will flower in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, five? You have no way of knowing, but it should help. So that's the answer to that.
Okay. Next question here is any chance we'll be able to purchase a grafted Zill 4026?
Okay. So what was happening with that one is we were getting so much demand for 4026 trees, it was exceeding our capacity to produce them because we're limited by how much budwood we have on those trees. In fact, we only planted a second one relatively recently. Um, and the other one is in a bad spot in terms of uh, the soil that it happens to be in. And so I've had to give it a lot of extra nutrition to keep it happy. It's been attacked by thrips a number of times too. That was a problem getting good budwood off of it. So we shut down the graft request function for 4026 on our website. My expectation is that this coming year we will reopen it again because we were able to graft quite a few of them this fall, more than we had orders for. But the problem was we were getting an order for 4026 like every day, and it was becoming a little bit too much. So we will definitely bring it back at some point in the not too distant future, and hopefully have a better supply of the budwood from the trees, and we'll know to make larger quantities of them than we have existing orders for. But that the demand for that kind of took us a little bit by surprise. So
Okay. We have a super chat question. Everybody, the super chat question is gonna surpass the other questions. I'll do my best to make that happen. Like I said, even if it's a nickel, you'll get your question probably answered sooner. So ND asked, and by the way, thank you for the super chat, ND. He asked, I have an orange sherbet in 130-gallon pot, and the trunk has started oozing orange brown fluid. Any thoughts on why and what month you expect to see flowers on orange sherbet?
um, So that sounds like gummosis to me, which we talked about a few questions ago. And typically that's due to some kind of internal infection. Sometimes that heals on its own, but if you're concerned about it, you can apply some kind of a bactericide, like a strong copper, or rotate it with some other non-copper fungicide indicated against bacteria. In other cases, that can be due to cold damage. It can be due to sometimes certain micronutrient deficiencies. My guess would be, though, it's more likely some sort of infection from some kind of pathogen. And like I said, sometimes they heal on their own, and other times, if it gets worse, then you have to think about treating it. When can you expect the fruit? Was that the other question, Paul?
Yes. Yes, the that
Orange
variety.
sherbet fruit? Yeah. Usually that's in season here for us in late June through the month of July. Sometimes we'll have a few hanging into August.
I
I
think
think
this
that.
is flower. When could you expect the
When
flower?
does it flower? Well, we have a few that are producing some panicles now. It's really going to depend on your location, what part of Florida you're in, or if you're in Florida at all. That wasn't really specified, but if they're in Florida, it's going to flower at some point between now and the month of March. It's hard to say. It varies by tree, but generally speaking, orange sherbet trees aren't that difficult to get bloom from. So they'll probably mostly flower around the same time all the other mango trees are flowering.
Okay. Another question is, what does Alex think about Mamey Sapote?
What do I think about Mamey sapote? I love Mamey sapote. It's one of my favorite fruits. We're collecting different kinds of it. I think we have like more than 17 varieties of it now or something like that that we've collected. Some of them are a long ways away from fruiting, but some of them have been fruiting for us for years now. That's one of my favorite fruits. Absolutely. I love it. I wish more people grew it here in Florida. One of the things I love about Mamey is that we're not crossing our fingers hoping that it's going to flower because it doesn't need cold fronts to bloom. Uh, it fruits in the most tropical of conditions. And the other cool thing about them is they're very consistent. They always have some developing fruit or flowers on them. And so basically you get fruit from them every year as long as they don't get damaged by you know a storm or something. But there's downsides to them too, and it's understandable. They take a very long time to fruit as grafted trees, even relative to other grafted fruit trees that we grow commonly down here. So that can frustrate people. A lot of people don't have the patience to grow it. They're a little bit like avocados. They require a lot more nutrition than mango trees do. So, but we've got a nice collection of them, and we're gonna add more varieties in the future. So, and we want to promote some of the more rare varieties of mamey because historically speaking, down here in South Florida, you've typically only had access to a couple varieties of mameys in the Florida nursery trade, with the exception of Julian Lara, who obviously is has propagated some pretty obscure varieties and stuff. But the other major nurseries haven't really made too many of these other varieties of mameys besides Pantene Magana, a little bit of Pace and Viejo, I guess. But there's some really exceptional ones out there that people should try and people should grow. And I would like to get more people growing them, get more people interested in growing mamey. But some people don't care for it. It's a little too dense or too rich or whatever. But I feel it's got really good application, not just as a fresh fruit, but like for making other things with, like pies and ice creams and shakes. It's great for that too. So,
All right. What is the case if you are getting a new growth emerging now on fruiting mango trees?
what about new growth emerging now? What is the
It
what?
says, what is the case if you are getting new growth emerging now on fruiting mango trees?
The case.
I guess what
Okay.
does it mean? I guess.
Does it mean okay? Well, it's not desirable, I can tell you that. Sometimes that happens when a tree has too much nitrogen in its canopy. Um, I've seen that happen quite a bit. Um, Maybe it was receiving too much irrigation, maybe you got too much rainfall. Maybe it was pruned too late in the cycle, especially trees that are pruned like after September. That's more likely to happen. So usually that's what's going on. Um, and then you got to hope if it's a tree that's big enough to fruit and you were expecting fruit from it, you've either got to hope that that growth hardens off and gets enough cold weather in the coming months that it responds with a bloom, maybe in March or something like that, if the conditions are appropriate for it to. Or you can also try removing that growth, that fresh growth. It depends on the variety. You know, some mangoes flower no problem off of fresh growth. Edward trees can have real fresh growth and they'll still flower if they get a nice cold front after the growth hardens off. Gene Ellen is another one that will flower off of pretty fresh stuff, and there's a bunch of others too, by the way. But there's plenty of varieties that need quite a bit of maturity to those stems to flower, and so sometimes if you time it right and you remove that fresh growth that's coming out, the buds below that on the old mature stem will end up flowering on the next cycle when you get some more cool, dry weather rolling. But it's really hard to time that. You don't know when, not only when the cold front and is going to be there and how much of it you're going to get, but you don't know exactly when the tree is going to do shoot initiation. Tough to time, perfectly. Um, but as far as why the tree is flush in growth, those reasons that I mentioned earlier are all possibilities.
Okay, we have another super chat from that same person with the orange sherbet and big pot. He says location is Key West, and do you think overwatering could also be a possible cause for the oozing?
Yeah, that can happen when trees are experiencing some root rot. So yes, that's it. That is a possibility. I'm not saying that's what's going on, but like overwatering happens here more likely when your soil is too rich. Um, in the Keys, your soil is not usually too rich, but then again, you're talking about growing in a container, so I didn't take that into consideration. Sometimes people's potting mixes, they're using like potting soil from Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, and it's too rich and the tree gets a lot of water and the soil doesn't drain so well. So then you start seeing some root rot, and then that can also potentially trigger gummosis as well, I suppose. So it's a possibility.
Okay, another question is, what's your top three mango varieties?
For what? For eating?
It just says, what's your top three mango varieties?
Okay. I'm going to answer that from the perspective of what are my top three favorite to eat, which can change by the hour, I suppose, right? Well, my favorite mango is sweet tart, my favorite mango to eat, but like, so I'll throw that in my top three of this, answering this specific question. Um, what else will I put in there? Maybe M4 and maybe
Really, M4. Interesting.
M4 is outstanding. Yeah, M4
Yeah,
is
I know
elite.
it is, but of all of them, that's one you would pick. I know your third one would be ST Maui.
That's a great pick. Thanks
Yes,
for picking it for me, Paul.
you're
There we go.
welcome.
There's three that for at 9:49 on the 15th of December 2024. That just happens to be my top three tonight. How about that? That's only for eating, by the way, not for overall tree performance and other factors too.
What
So,
about your top three trees to grow?
oh man. Pickering,
I know what you're gonna pick.
certainly one. Another great tree is Sassy Love is a great tree.
And you're gonna
You
say
know,
dwarf Hawaiian, right?
no,
No, really. I
no,
thought that was one of
no,
your
no, no,
favorite
no. It
trees.
has enough issues. I mean, like it's great for our
Interesting.
location, but like if I go out here and tell everyone to plant dwarf Hawaiian trees, there's going to be some disappointed folks because some
Okay.
of these people in more humid areas will not have as much success. Um, you know, um, No, Pickering, Sassy Loves are great. Honeykiss is a great tree.
Okay.
Such a small tree, so disease resistant, at least for us, and consistently productive. I love that about it. Just because a mango isn't like a 5 out of 5 doesn't mean that the tree, when you factor in its natural disease resistance and its growth habit and its productivity, those factors count for a lot. And so for me, like a mango has to be like, if I'm gonna rate the whole equation really high, right? It's got to rate like above a 4 in flavor at 4 out of 5. Now Sassy Love is like a 5 out of 5, right? But a Pickering to me is more like a 4.5 out of 5 on a good day. But like it's the sum of all its parts kind of brings it to that level as a tree that, makes you very happy and confident to grow it. So
Taste is so subjective. Did you just say Pickering was 4.5 out of 5?
4 to 4.5 on a great day. So on its best days, I've had Pickerings with Brix above 23. You would have been impressed by that. I can
Sure.
guarantee you. Um, Now, are they always like that? No. And a lot of that comes down to how the tree's being cared for, where it's being grown, how soon it was cut, blah, blah, blah. But like if I'm grading mangoes on a 1 through 5 scale, Pickering probably falls as a solid 4 to 4.5. Like I have a range there. It's not in the same league as the elite mangoes that would go 4.5 to 5, right? So
Okay.
that's your sweet tarts and your ST Maoris and your cacks and your orange sherbets and lemon zest and things like that, right? So
Tell us about the bricks. How do you measure that? And like, is it complicated or easy?
no, it's actually pretty easy. Anybody at home can do it. You can purchase a refractometer. There are um, old analog ones, if you will, that's just looking through a little telescopic device kind of looking thing. And you just put a little bit of the juice from the fruit on it, and it will give you a reading. And that reading tells you the total soluble solids, basically how much sugar does the fruit have. They make digital ones too, by the way, that can be pretty precise. Um, and you can buy these on like Amazon or something. And it's important for a few reasons. One is that like you want fruit to be flavorful and robust, and the ones that have a higher TSS or Brix number tend to be the more popular varieties from an eating standpoint amongst customers and consumers. But the other thing is that higher TSS is generally associated with better shelf life as well. So you want the fruit to last longer before, spoiling or becoming unsaleable. So, um, that's the other plus of having higher bricks. But yeah, it's easy to measure.
Okay. We have another super chat from Angel. And again, if you got a super chat, if you want to get your question in sooner. So is there a way to tell whether a pushing bud is vegetative growth or flowers?
No, not really. Not until it's emerged, at least to some extent. Now, once they've come out like a few inches or so, then it can start to become obvious because you can start to see. Now, but even then, I need to warn you that you can have transitions from floral to vegetative or vegetative to floral. And when that happens, like if it's floral to vegetative, you will see they come out with leaves first, and then the flowers come behind it. So even then, you don't necessarily know for sure until the whole panicles come out. But like when the buds are just swelling up, no, not really. But you can make an inference based off of recent conditions. And I know for a fact that most of the swelling buds on our trees currently are going to result in inflorescence. So,
Okay. The next question is a fun question that I think we might disagree on, but that's okay. The question was, would you put Sunrise in a top tier of Zill varieties with Sweetheart, M4, Ceci Love, etc.? How and any others would you put in that group?
would I put sunrise in the top tier? Maybe on certain days, I would probably grade it in that very, very good range, like 4.5, 4 to 4.5. But I've had individual sunrise fruit that were certainly like, four above four, like, right with some of the best ones. Um, but consistently speaking, probably not. I wouldn't put it up there with like orange sherbet, lemon zest, sweet tart, sugarloaf. I think those are a little bit above it. Um, but I would grow sunrise over some of those. How about that? It's a productive tree, consistently productive tree, and it's got um, very good resistance to bacterial black spot. Gets very little bacterial spot. It can fruit through powdery mildew. It can fruit out in the acreage, out in the western communities of Palm Beach County where there's a lot of humidity. So it's like one of those trees where like you don't have to be as worried about your your local humidity if you're going to grow it. It is kind of an aggressive tree though. Not kind of, it is an aggressive tree. It's a vigorous tree. So you need to have a plan for giving it enough space to thrive, um, and be willing to prune it probably. So it's a good tree. It has some physiological defects sometimes with the fruit that can be frustrating. It can get stem end rot. It can get this kind of big anthracnose spot on the fruit that can cause splits and then it can decay when that happens. Um, so it's not perfect, but it's a pretty good tree, and it's a great choice for people like out in California, that need an aggressive, vigorous mango that's high quality. So
Yeah, it's become my favorite. And one thing I love it about it is, other than the amazing flavor, is when you freeze mangoes, some mangoes have less of a flavor. I
yeah,
have found when you freeze sunrise, it's perfect, like frozen. The flavor's all there, full flavor. It's
yeah,
delicious.
yeah, that's true. So some of these West Indian flavored mangoes, their flavor profile holds up a little better when they're frozen compared to other flavor classes of mangoes. And that's absolutely true, Paul. Like a lot of mangoes will lose something. They'll lose something when you refrigerate them. When you freeze them, they can lose a lot. And they just don't taste anywhere close to what they do fresh. But yeah, sunrise does freeze pretty well.
Yes. Okay. And any others you would put in that group, the top tier? I mean,
The
there's
top tier? Oh, okay. Top tier. Only Zill varieties, or is this like in general?
he says, well, give us in general, but he asked, no, just in general.
Oh, okay. Um, in general, like so, like the elite for me is okay. It's mangoes like I've already mentioned the sweet tart, the ST Maui, the cac, orange sherbet. I'll throw Valkyrie in there for something different, and Dot. Valkyrie and Dot are elite mangoes to me. Pina Colada, um, M4 for sure. M4 is phenomenal. Sugarloaf, outstanding, elite. Um, Phoenix and White Puri. Um, what else? There's more than that. A
Well,
lot. I
several times I've been on your farm making videos, and I
can't.
think twice recently, maybe three times, we spoke about a tree, and you said it might be one of the best tasting mangoes on your farm, and that was a creme brulee.
Yes. Oh God, yeah. Creme brulee. Creme brulee is elite, elite. That's one of the best there is for sure. Giselle is one of the best. That's another one that we've tried to highlight. Really exceptional fruit. Um, P22 can be really outstanding. Sassy Love, right there as well. So we talked about 4026. Gary Mango is right up there. Some of the other numbered hybrids like 318 and 4017 are amazing, amazing tasting mangoes. Um, that USDA Tamor mango was one of the best this last year. What a terrible name, right? But like, it's all we can call it for now because it's not the real Tamor. Um, so those are, yeah, those are elite, um, Elite mangoes.
Okay, a completely different question. Somebody says, do you guys are familiar with Don Gilligy avocado? Uh, do you know that one?
What's the second part?
Don Gillogy, Gillogly.
No, I'm not familiar with that one, unfortunately. No.
I haven't heard of it either. Okay, another question. Can I still unpot mangoes right now in Jupiter, or is it too cold and should I wait until spring?
No, you can do it right now, especially because right now it's not too cold. It might become pretty cold in a week or two. If it gets cold, like down in the low 50s or 40s, then I would avoid doing the up potting then, because sometimes they don't transplant well when it's real cold. I've observed that. But if the nighttime lows are like in the 60s, usually you're fine. But the other thing to consider is they don't really grow too much during the winter months either. So if you prefer to just delay until spring, you might be able to do that too, as long as it's not, you know, uh, at risk of becoming too container bound. So,
Okay, another question. Can you name a few mango varieties for budwood scions that have a higher success rate?
mangoes that graft easily, I guess is what they mean.
Yeah.
Sure. What are some varieties that graft real easily? Sweet tart grafts easily, pickering grafts easily, carry grafts real easily. Carry is an easy mango to graft. Well, I say, I mean, I'm just going off of, you know, doing them in the nursery setting, of course. How they will do on your end, your mileage may vary based on your inexperience. What are some other easy ones to graft? Valencia Pride, CAC grafts real easily, and that's a terrific mango. And but very few issues grafting. I mean, most mangoes, aren't too challenging. There's some varieties that are trickier than others for sure, but it's not a terribly long list. But there's a few culprits that can give us some trouble sometimes. So depending on the situation.
Like name one or two.
Panchadera Kalasa can be difficult. That's an Indian variety. And um, what are some other ones that can be a little tricky? Surprisingly, Ah Ping can be a little bit of a challenge. That's one that sometimes gives us some trouble in the nursery setting. Uh, what are some other tricky ones? Well, those are a couple that pop to mind.
Okay.
It's a longer list than that, but it's not a super long list.
Okay. Another question is from Henry. Sarah Weevils. They're eating all the leaves. How can I get rid of them?
Um, I got to be careful about how I answer this. So, let me first say, we don't do anything about Sri Lankan weevils at our farm. Not on our nursery stock, not on our fruiting trees in the ground. We do not apply anything to control them because we consider them a cosmetic pest. Now, there's two ways to control them. One is mechanically by going and shaking them off the tree into like a container or an umbrella or whatever. I used to do this many years ago when I was initially trying to control them. And then you just dump them into a pan of soapy water or diesel fuel or whatever you want to use to kill them. And if you do that like at least once a week over the course of a month, you will disrupt their life cycle, if you will, and you will not see anywhere near as many of them. Or if you want to do it chemically, um, Carbonyl 7 will kill them, I believe. And imidacloprid will definitely kill them, but you're not going to want to eat the fruit from your tree for at least a year or more. So, anyway, those things will kill them. I'm not telling you to use those things, I'm just telling you that they will kill them. So don't go telling people that I told them to use imidacloprid. Okay.
Okay. JP asks, what spraying equipment can one use to efficiently spray sulfur?
What spray equipment? Well, you can use a little 1 gallon pump sprayer if you're only spraying a couple trees. You can use backpack sprayer. You can use a battery operated sprayer. We use a gasoline powered sprayer because we have to spray hundreds of trees. The big thing to keep in mind with sulfur is it needs to be almost constantly agitated or it will sink to the bottom of the tank. And then you're not applying it evenly. So, whatever you happen to use, make sure that you're either shaking the sprayer at least every minute or so, or you have an agitator installed in your sprayer, and that's much easier. But if you're only spraying a couple trees, like, you can just get a little 1 or 2 gallon pump sprayer from Home Depot or something and just shake it periodically, and that'll work. But when you're spraying a lot of trees, I much prefer to have something with a functioning agitator installed to keep the solution in suspension. So.
Okay. Is powdery mildew an issue in India, and what do they use to control it?
I believe it is, but that's interesting. I haven't, so I've talked to growers in India, but I don't recall talking to them about powdery mildew. I've talked about tons of other stuff. I'm certain it exists there. It's in the entire tropical world. So yes, that's the simple answer. What do they do to control it? I don't know. Some of their varieties probably fruit through powdery mildew. Maybe they don't, I don't know what kind of severity they experience with powdery mildew on an annual basis compared to our part of the world. I'm not sure, but I would imagine they're using a lot of the same products to control it. So,
Okay. How can we establish a council of tribal elders to make sure that no mango varieties do not have goofy names that make no sense?
I don't believe that you can. Um, you know, I'm kind of old school because when I was learning about mangoes a long time ago, I uh I was learning about mangoes before the era of the Zill hybrids and so forth. Most mangoes were named after people. They were named after our fellow human beings that discovered them or, after their families. Once in a while one would have a quirky name or whatever, but, a quirky name 40 years ago was Gold Nugget, right? It wasn't like, uh, well, I mean, you already know what I'm talking about, but like, I know what you mean by that. Anybody can name their mango whatever they want. If they're the ones that discovered it or bred it, they have, full right to call it whatever they want to. And as horticulturalists, we should generally respect what its name was, um, as long as it's not inappropriate or whatever. But um, you know, I don't breed mangoes, right? And so I haven't really assigned any names to mangoes myself. Um, but I think there's a temptation on the part of growers to come up with more exciting sounding names because they capture people's attention and they get more people to either buy the fruit or the trees. Um, and that temptation's not going to go away. So I would imagine you'll continue to see, but like at some point, like also people just run out of creativity and ideas. So there's only so many like citrus names you can come up with, right? Or coconut names.
So, in your
So
opinion, what's the absolute best name of a mango that you've ever heard that
the
like fit
best name, the
the
best name is
best?
coconut cream. Coconut cream.
Yeah.
I mean, like in terms of like its desirability and like what it does to people's attention, coconut cream is probably the best
Okay.
name. Like in terms of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, like I wish it had been applied to a different mango though. Like like it was that name was given to C20, I guess it was. And it should have. I wish I shouldn't say it should. in case Gary's watching or something. But like, I wish it had been applied to what we call Sugarloaf for M4. Like, I think those, or even some of the other coconut ones, I think are even more coconutty than the coconut cream proper. So,
Do
but
you
I think
believe,
that's a great
go ahead.
name.
Do
Yeah.
you believe the worst name for a mango ever was calling the Super Alfonso, a most confusing name?
It's a misnomer because it doesn't taste like Alfonso.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
If it
It's
actually
most
did, I would say fine. I mean, I'm guilty of of convincing Gary Zill to call the Super Julie. So, uh, is it the worst name? No. There's some
not from a name standpoint, but from a standpoint of most
what it
confusing or
tastes like.
mislabeled name. Yeah, it's like nothing to do with the Alfonso, right?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the name Peach Cobbler for Peach Cobbler. I don't think it tastes like peach cobbler. I think it's actually a citrus flavored mango. So, there's a few others that the names just don't match, but I have to look through the list and kind of go like, yeah. But then some of them just have bad names in general that just
Yeah.
unappealing. So,
Well, we have another super chat question from Florida Man Bear, and thank you for your super chat. Uh, he says, "I'm your neighbor in West Palm. What are your top 10 best overall for West Palm? If that's too broad, give me tasty fresh eat, test tasty fresh eating."
okay, if they're like near where our farm is located, like that part of West Palm Beach, and we're not talking about like unincorporated out west or whatever, you can grow a lot more stuff where we're located. So I would say like if you're giving me 10 to work with, I would I would want to have a few really early season mangoes like Dwarf Hawaiian and Rosy Gold and Edward, perhaps like to give you some fruit potentially in March or at least April and May. And then a few of the, early stuff that's like in May, early June, like lemon meringue and Angie. Um, and then probably amongst the mid-season ones, I might even throw in something like Phoenix because it's like, oh, dot. So if you're in West Palm Beach, I would grow a dot tree if you've got room for 10 trees because that's a mango I can't recommend to people further west because it has so much issues with anthracnose out west, but it's like such an incredible mango and it fruits so well for us in West Palm Beach. So like that's an example of a West Palm Beach mango. It's not from West Palm Beach, it's from Boynton Beach technically, but like that is a mango that if I was planting a yard in West Palm Beach, I would absolutely consider because I couldn't consider growing it elsewhere. Um, what are some other ones? Um, I mean, some of these like you can grow outside of West Palm Beach too, but they're just so good that you shouldn't ignore growing them. Like Sassy Love, the M4 for a great late season mango. Um, Another good late season variety that I wouldn't recommend to somebody like out west, but in West Palm Beach, I would say would be acceptable and has performed really well for us the last several years is Beverly. It's an old variety, but it still tastes good and it's still pretty popular and it's productive in West Palm Beach. Um, so um, what I'm trying to think of right now are varieties like the Dot, where like if I was talking to the typical customer who's telling me that they live in Royal Palm Beach or Wellington or Loxahatchee or whatever, West Boynton or West Boca, I'm not going to tell them to plant a Dot, right? And I'm trying to think of mangoes like that I could recommend in West Palm that are really good, you know. Um, all right, well, I'm drawing a blank, but
Okay, and do want to say whenever you mention dot or whenever somebody has a dot tree, I've learned this past year, and it's one thing you told me, Alex, is they need to be picked not to ripen on the tree for the dot variety.
yeah, that's true. They need to be picked as soon as they're breaking any yellow color. They got to come off and ripen off the tree. So,
Yeah, one of the best videos we did was when you we went through the whole list of mangoes when to pick them, which ones stay ripe and which ones don't. It was so helpful to so many people, like all your videos are. But that was so much great tips in there, and everybody, I'll link that below if people want to see that. So, all right, another question is, which store sulfur product can we buy for spraying a small orchard?
Well, how big of an orchard? How many trees? I mean, like backyards can usually be sprayed with like the, I don't even remember what they call it. They sell it at hardware stores a lot of the time. Comes in like a couple pound sized bags, but any wettable sulfur product will work. Um, Larger bags of the stuff for like what we do, you have to usually go get them from ag supply shops. There's a number of them in South Florida. Some ones local to us are like Howard Fertilizer and, Helena Chemical and places like that. They're going to sell them in like 25 or 50-pound bags, but you might not need something that, you know, that large. You might be able to get by with the bonide sulfur or whatever.
Okay. Can you tell me anything about the little Cado, the warts avocado?
I used to have one. Um, it died and I didn't replace it because I didn't think it tasted that good. I've met people that like it, um, but I have no plans on growing it again. I've just felt like there was other avocados were growing that were better. So
Okay. Is sulfurants helpful when spraying sulfur?
is what?
Sulfuriants, Surficent,
Maybe they
CANT,
meant surfactant.
surfactant, yes.
Yeah, it is helpful. It'll extend the longevity of it.
Okay.
That's true for
And
most products anyway, not just sulfur.
okay. South California grower here. His name's Max. He says, do you water mature tree or when the tree is full of bloom? Will watering increase fruit set?
Watering is not going to increase fruit set, but it will increase fruit retention, which is a different matter. So I don't usually water them when they're flowering. I usually water them when the fruit has set. And then we'll do that at least several times a week for the first couple months of fruit development here, um, to encourage more fruit retention, discourage excess abscission. But then you have to cut it off at some point because eventually it doesn't really help anymore. The tree is going to retain what it's got, and then it's just going to make the fruit taste disappointing if it continues too long. And also it's going to increase the humidity underneath the tree. And when the fruit on mangoes begin to mature, that's when they actually start to become susceptible to anthracnose again, because they go through this period of time where when they're small, they're prone to anthracnose up until like maybe they're golf ball size, and then they go through several months where the fungus doesn't really bother them too much, and then like when they reach that mature state, if they're getting too much humidity, you're going to get more post-harvest anthracnose. But in California, that probably wouldn't be a problem because you're so dry there. So watering schedules on mango in California is different than South Florida. Be aware of that because your nighttime temperatures are colder and they don't utilize water as efficiently in those kind of conditions. So a lot of people trying to grow mango trees in California end up with root rot because they overwater them. So
Okay. What would be a good comparison for the CAC variety? Size, taste, quality, production, disease resistance.
comparison. Like another mango that is similar to cac in flavor and
Yes. Yes.
well, cac is what we call an Indo-Chinese hybrid type flavor. Other mangoes that fall into that category are going to be varieties like Sweet Tart, um, Sassy Love, Venus, P22, um, Saigon, which is like a small dwarfish tree. Um, what are some others? I'm trying to think of like high quality Indo-Chinese hybrid type mangoes. Well, those are a few. I'm not saying they taste identical, okay, but you'll find some of that cola syrup element to them that you'll find in the cac. There's the Cat Hoa Loc, which is also from Vietnam and has kind of a similar class of flavor. It doesn't taste exactly like cac, but that's a very good mango. And it's more of a vertical growth habit than the cac. Cac is more spreading. Um, what is also similar to cac? Buttercream. I didn't mention that one. That that falls into that category, but is a less vigorous tree than the cac. Maybe not quite as productive as cac is, though. Um, and then, yeah, well, those are some. So,
Okay. Is it true Sapodilla is invasive?
well, it's true that I guess it was the University of Florida that declared it invasive. Um, is it actually in practice invasive? In my experience, no. Um, now, if you go to its native range in the Yucatan of Mexico, sapodilla trees are growing like weeds, okay, and in relatively poor quality soil. But from what I've seen, they don't reproduce from seed that readily here in South Florida, such that you see them growing, basically feral all over the place. I mean, they're no more invasive than mango trees are or avocado trees, in my opinion, here in Florida. But yes, they are marked as an invasive under the list that UF published. I guess it was UF, yeah. Um,
Okay.
IFAS. So, but in my opinion, no, they're not. So,
Okay. When is the best time to graft?
what are you grafting?
I would assume they're saying mangoes, but
Yeah, but we've had
good
avocado
question.
and sapodilla questions. So,
Yes,
what are you
yes, yes.
grafting? Well, without going through every species, if we're making the subject primarily mango, the best time to graft mango is in the warmer months of the year. You can graft them any time of the year, okay? Um, but optimally, the warmer months are better because um, they take a little quicker for one thing, and they're not going to flower from the graft. Whereas if we graft them now, there's a good possibility, or if you graft them in the late fall, and we have to fight that all the time with stuff that we grafted in a nursery, it ends up flowering. Um, and that's undesirable because you want new shoots and leaves, right, to produce your new tree. So we'll say anytime from March or April up until about October is the best time for mango to be grafted. So
Okay. How much fertilizer would you put in a young 3-gallon mango to encourage growth?
not very much. If you're fertilizing, is if it's like in a pot, usually like a tablespoon is adequate. But if it's in the ground, I go by how many feet tall. So um, I would say a tablespoon per foot of tree height. So if it's a 2 foot or 3 foot tall, if it's 3 foot tall tree, it's 3 tablespoons once a month during the warmer months of the year. I might not even fertilize it right now, um, just to encourage some growth. That's not a lot of fertilizer. And be mindful that once it's big enough to produce fruit, you need to stop giving it that stuff, or at least the nitrogen containing fertilizer. You got to switch it to a different type of fertilizer.
Okay, if you have a mango in a pot for 1.5 years, should you restake the plant when you plant it in the ground? How important is this to help strengthen the plant while it's being established?
It's not necessarily that important. Um, if it's just got no strength at all and it's drooping over when you plant it, then yes, you got to stake it up. But a lot of times you can just plant them straight in the ground without any staking, and as long as you're pruning them properly and everything, you don't necessarily have to stake them. It depends on the relative strength of the tree's stem when you plant it. But I've seen some that just flop over. And when that happens, yeah, you're going to want to stake it up, but you're probably also going to want to prune it down a little bit to get the scaffold limbs starting as well. Um, so that tends to happen when the tree has been fed a little too much nitrogen fertilizer in an effort to get the shoot to grow quickly in the nursery setting, and it kind of outgrows its roots to some extent. Um, so I've seen that happen sometimes. But you don't necessarily have to stake your tree when it's planted. If it's nice and sturdy to start out with, a lot of times you don't need to do that. So
Okay. You mentioned grafting 15 or less hem Sagar. What are the top three most grafted trees this year requested?
I don't. Um, I'd have to go.
Varieties. Right, top three varieties this year.
Yeah, I mean that. I don't. I'm not even sure. I know certain varieties we have to make lots of just because of typical retail demand, if you will, that we encounter in the nursery trade. And also, we like to make certain varieties more than others just because um, they're easy for us to recommend on a good conscience to customers that are asking for a recommendation for their yards. Beyond that, I can't get into too much specifics because that gets into the finer details of my business. So, but we have to make a lot of stuff. We have to make like hundreds of varieties. We get orders for almost everything that we grow that we have offered, available. And some of them we get very few orders of. I mean, real small numbers, and we'll graft like less than 10 of them just because we have to meet whatever we got orders for. And then some of them we're grafting literally hundreds of trees of. So
Well, if somebody likes one of your varieties and if it's not too popular, but they want you to graft it, so what's the process? They contact you through your website, and then they pay you. So from that time all the way to the time they're with the tree in their hand, how long does that usually take?
it depends on when they place the order. Um, if the order is placed by, I forget when we put the deadline this year, it might have been the 1st of October, it might have been September something. I don't remember. Anyway, if it's placed before that point, we tell them that they can expect the tree to be usually ready before the summer, like sometime in spring. But if it's placed after that point, then we might have a tree ready for them by then, just because okay, let's suppose we get 8 orders for USDA hemp Sagar, right? We've been talking about that. This is a made up number, by the way. Okay. We're not going to graft 8. We're going to graft more than 8. And invariably, most of the time, we'll end up with some spares, some spare trees, some extra trees. If you ordered after that deadline, let's suppose after that fall deadline, and we have a spare for you, we might have a tree ready by spring. But if we do not, we're going to be grafting you a tree in the springtime once we start grafting mangoes again, and the tree's not going to be ready until the fall, most likely. And then the same thing, we have a spring grafting deadline. So if you get your order in by that point in spring, I haven't set that deadline yet, by the way. Historically, it's been around May 1st. But like if you don't have your order in by then, it gets turned into a fall order, and then your tree's not ready until, the next spring. But if you have your order in before then, the tree's ready by fall. It's somewhere, so you got to figure most of the time it's around like a 6 to 8 month waiting period if it's a tree that we have to graft you a new tree for. If it's a tree that we have a spare for, sometimes we already have it in stock ready to go. But you've got to ask uh, first, like if you're expecting a tree right away, if we have it in our inventory. Sometimes you got a tree that's been grafted and we require they go through a couple flushes of growth before we let them leave our nursery. So maybe it's grafted and it's had one flush of growth, but it hasn't had that second flush yet. So we can't like mark it as available, but in a few months it might be. So, or even weeks. Um, if you're thinking about placing a grafting request, just verify first that we don't have the tree in stock to begin with. Um, and then if we don't, be patient because we will make the tree for you. If it's not available on the website as a tree that you can order, it means there's some reason we're not producing it. And that reason, it could be a number of different factors, but so
Okay. Okay. Uh, what would your choice be for early, mid, and late avocados varieties?
I really like amongst the early ones, I really like Dupuis and I really like Brogdon. So those are like summer avocados. Like we'll have them in July, certainly before August most of the time, but they'll be around still in August. Middle, I love it's a really good mid-season avocado. Um, Catalina is almost mid-season because it comes after those first two, but I guess it's still technically kind of early. Um, but I like Florida Haas. We finished harvesting those like a couple weeks ago actually, but like so that's terrific for the middle. Um, what else? The late, I love there's a lot of late ones I like. I love Lula, I love Campong, I love Oro Negro. Those are all great. Um, oh, and middle one I forgot. So one that really I became really fond of this year amongst the middle ones was the San Miguel from Hawaii. It's a purple avocado. It's not a very big fruit, but man, it's rich and really good oil content and flavorful. So that's one that bears mentioning for sure. The
Was this the
San
first year you've tried it?
No, no, I've had it for a few years fruiting now, but it had a real nice crop this year. The tree's grown real slowly. These Hawaiian avocados grow slow as molasses here in Florida. I don't know why, but that's just how it is. But it's perfectly healthy, and so that's a really good one. I like Day avocado a lot. Day is more of a mid-season avocado, but sometimes we've had some issues with the fruit ripening unevenly with that one, so it's not perfect. Anyway, so those ones that I just talked about are all real great varieties that I'd be happy to plant here in Florida.
Okay. Uh, what are some of the easiest flowering mango trees?
Easiest flowering mango trees here that would be like Rosy Gold, Edward, Rosa from Brazil, Dwarf Hawaiian, Julie, um, Gene Allen. Um, what else flowers really easily? Tess Pollock flowers really easily here. And it's very good mango. So those are like they trigger with very little cool weather. Um, the next group is stuff like Pickering, Angie, Glenn. What else? Carrie, Ugly Betty, um, things like that. Duncan flowers pretty easily. But like, that they take a little bit more than that first group I mentioned. That first group I mentioned consistently, we're getting some spring mangoes from that first group almost every year because of how easily they flower. Um, and there's others too, that a couple others that I'm leaving off that flower pretty easily.
Do the easy flowering mangoes typically do two flushes a year or not really?
Yeah, it's not uncommon at all for most of those to have two crops. Some of them have as many as three. That I've certainly seen that on Dwarf Hawaiian a lot, and I see it on Edward a little bit. Usually, we'll have two Edward crops, and we'll have as many as three rosy gold crops. That's not unusual, but at a minimum, we'll almost always have two rosy gold crops. Gene Allen, we usually only have one crop, but Tess Pollock will usually have at least two, if not three. So
You mentioned Tess Pollock was you like Tess Pollock?
I like Tess Pollock, but this harkens back to that question earlier that the person was asking about mangoes for like West Palm Beach or whatever. That's a mango like if somebody's in the coastal zone looking for something interesting, I might think about mentioning that one. But if they're in Loxahatchee land, I'm not telling them to grow Tess Pollock because I know it gets anthracnose. And out there, it's going to be more challenging to get it to fruit. It might flower, but it also might get consumed by fungus when it does. So, um, so I like that mango, but we only have one tree, and we're not planning on adding any more. The one is enough, you know. So
Good. Okay. Uh, all right. Circling back to the avocado dieback problem, would you suggest adding gypsum to the soil around the avocado tree? And does NPK replace my 839 fertilizer application?
well, your 839 is going to be an NPK fertilizer. Gypsum is calcium, and your avocado is not dying back because of calcium deficiency, okay? That doesn't mean that the calcium won't benefit the avocado, because it will. It's a necessary nutrient, but your dieback is more likely occurring because of potassium deficiency, manganese, iron, or boron deficiency, or some combination of the above. It's not likely happening because of calcium deficiency. So it's not going to treat the dieback, no.
Okay. I noticed Zill 23-2 is no longer in Tropical Acres list. Was the variety a failure?
I still have 23 too. Maybe it's not on the list for some reason, but I'll have to go look and see. But I definitely still have that variety. Was it a failure? Well, I'll put it to you this way. It has not met my lofty expectations. I was thinking, so this thing is like a hybrid of the Kit and the Gary, and I was thinking something along the lines of M4 because that's what M4 is. It's a Kit Gary cross. I mean, there's other Kit Gary crosses too, but this one, Gary Zill liked it enough to keep the tree around. Um, I remember his was kind of unhealthy though, and the funny thing is, mine has been kind of unhealthy too, and it's a top work that it shares a stump with another variety. But anyway, I've had issues with it with bacterial spot and rot. And the specimens that I've eaten haven't been that great. Like you can taste that coconut Gary thing going on a little bit, but it's not as pronounced as I was thinking. It is a large fruit. It's like a really round shaped M4. Anyway, I what I need to do is take some material off of that thing and top work a different tree or plant a grafted tree and see how it does. Because that where that tree is located, it's between two very large trees. It gets a lot of shade. It's getting dominated by its stump mate. So, um, I, but I'm not certainly not leaping to recommend it to anybody based on its performance so far. It's really just a curiosity, and I need to give it perhaps a better opportunity to thrive. But from what I've seen from it so far, it doesn't look like it's worth replicating. So.
Okay. What are some slow growers or smaller trees for backyard growers trying to plant many varieties?
Small trees, dwarfish trees. There's a bunch. There's Pickering, there's Honeykiss, there's Dwarf Hawaiian, there's Julie, there's Sassy Love. Um, there is, I mean, like, not all these are dwarf trees, okay? Some of these are trees that you can realistically keep under 10 feet in height and spread. We'll call that a smaller tree. Rosy Gold. Um, what else? Good small trees.
Didn't you tell me Amrapali was small?
Amberpali, yeah, that's a good one. That's a good thinking there, Paul. Yeah, Amberpali is definitely a dwarfish tree. There's one that we grow, another Indian one called Arca Neelkaran that's kind of interesting. Mahmood Vikarabad, speaking of Indian mangoes, Mahmood Vikarabad is a dwarfish variety with outstanding flavor. Unfortunately, we only have one tree in the ground, so we're limited on how much budwood we can take off of it to produce trees, but that's terrific, terrific. The Saigon mango, the original Saigon, is a dwarfish tree, very small and a high quality fruit, in the Chinese hybrid type flavor. We haven't talked about that one too much. And those are just a few. There's others. And it kind of comes down to like how small you're trying to keep the tree. There's quite a few that can be kept under 12 feet with pruning. It's a fairly substantial list, but once you get shorter and shorter than that, you can keep any mango tree any size you want to. It doesn't mean it's going to reward you with flowering and fruiting. So,
Okay. Do you know when you're gonna have Zill 4026 back in stock? The guy said he's been checking every day to see if you're grafting any. And can you and Paul do a video on 4026 growth and production?
okay, well, we can probably do a video at some point next mango season about it. Um, I mentioned earlier in this session about how I've had some issues with the our bigger 4026 where it's located. It gets some micronutrient deficiency and it's been really hit hard by thrips the last 2 years. Um, so it's not as big as it could be at this point in its life, I think. It looks healthy right now, but when will we start producing the trees again? Well, we made quite a few in the fall to get caught up on orders for it. I would imagine we'll start taking orders for it again maybe by the spring months, but I'm not ready to do it yet because I need to see how the batch we did in fall turns out. If we end up in a situation where we kind of undergrafted or whatever, we might hold off a little bit. But at some point this coming year, we're going to offer that tree for grafting requests again. So, yeah, I
Okay.
just can't give you a firm date.
Yes, and any variety that the audience wants to see me and Alex feature, just let me know in the comments or send me an email and me and Alex will add it to our list. So Mark Young wants to know, is that Glen Mango behind you in the picture?
It's actually a Zill 80, a mango that I don't talk about enough,
We
actually.
did a video about that one, I think.
We did, but I don't. It's a mango where, like, okay, somebody asked about, like, that's something I could have suggested to the West Palm guy, for example, for something, different, unique, late. Um, or people that ask about late season mangoes. I never remember to talk about that thing, but it's really good, really good. And Gary Zill thought enough of it to use it in his breeding program.
No,
He
it was
might
good.
not
I
tell you
remember it
that,
being good. Yeah.
yeah, like I mean, he might not mention it amongst his favorite varieties or whatever, but like Fruit Punch was a Zill 80 seedling. Carla was a Zill 80 seedling. Speaking of mangoes that I want to promote more, right? Carla deserves a lot more attention. Um, Super Alfonso was a Zill 80 seedling. So this is a mango with some impressive progeny, and it's a very impressive mango in its own right, and a very beautiful fruit. So that's the mango in that background image there, nestled against the perennial peanut. That is a Zill 80, so named because it first fruited in 1980, and it was probably a Kent seedling, from what the Zills have speculated. They even grafted it for a bit back in the 80s, but they don't make it anymore. We do graft Zill 80 trees, by the way, for anybody that might be interested in trialing it out. So it's it's a very robustly flavored mango. It has its issues, okay? It's not perfect, but we have a couple of them in the ground.
Okay. Uh, you mentioned Carla. Carla's excellent.
Yeah, yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
Excellent
That's a
flavor.
that's a mango we need to promote more. Um, we need to get more people planting that. It's such a great later season mango. It's not as late as, an M4 or whatever, but it fits that Kent season, right? That traditional late July to August season. Um, you still got people planting Kents and kits and stuff like that when they could be planting Carlas instead, or cotton candies, or whatever, or M4s. So Carla, definitely a great tree. I'm very happy to have one in my backyard. We have one at the farm as well. And if I was starting like a new farm and I, was trying to think of varieties to plant, that one wouldn't be far from mind. So
Amongst the late season varieties, where does Orange Essence fit
it
in your
fits
opinion?
in terms of eating quality very high. Um, Great citrus flavor. I love that thing. That orange essence is wonderful. Um, that's a mango that maybe one day I'll add to my backyard if I find the space for it, if I decide to top work something. I like orange essence quite a bit. Another great alternative to stuff like Kent and Palmer and some of the other, you know, old technology stuff that some people still ask or talk about. So
Speaking of late season varieties, the next person's asking a question about one of your latest season varieties. Alex, what do you think about Little Gem Mango?
I like Little Jim. Um, they're super productive trees. It's just amazing. They never cease to amaze me how much fruit they can make in a given year, even when they had a large crop the prior year, or maybe I wasn't expecting so much from them or whatever. It's an Indian, West Indian type flavor. It's not super robust, okay? It's like you know, it's more of a medium-bodied mango. Um, but it's super productive, super disease resistant. There's not much bad I can say about it. I mean, like the worst thing I can say about it is that it hangs so late into the season that a lot of times the seeds will germinate inside of the fruit, and then you'll get mangoes that have a root protruding out of them or a stem protruding out of the skin, and then you can't sell the fruit when that happens, or at least it limits how you can sell them. But yeah, that's a good one. Is it as good as these other late season ones I've been talking about? No. No, objectively speaking, M4 is better. Cotton Candy's better. Orange Essence is better. Okay? Carla is better than Little Gem. But Little Gem is a nice insurance mango to have because it makes so much fruit and it carries fruit very late. Like I know I had fruit on them in September. We were still picking them in September. That's very late. It was one of the last mangoes to still have fruit. There's a lot to be said for something that can do that. And it was probably a good candidate in areas that face a lot of disease pressures because it gets very little to no disease. They're very clean. Um, that was a really good hybrid from the Zill program. That was a worthy hybrid, and I'm glad that it's out in the nursery trade now.
One thing I noticed about the Little Gem, I don't know if this is a common thing, but when I had them last year, every other one was amazing, but every other one was like not good at
Yeah,
all.
yeah. So there's some variability tree to tree. They make a lot of fruit inside of the canopy, and so when that happens, that fruit doesn't get as much sunlight and air and everything, and so that fruit is often inferior to the ones that are, in direct sun. Um, but yes, you'll get some that are mediocre, and you'll get some that are quite good. But I still enjoyed eating them. I ate plenty of little gems, plenty of them this year. Especially getting into the middle later part of August and September. I was eating little gems. I froze little gems. Um, they're and the tree is not terribly aggressive. It's fairly compact. Not a dwarf, but it's not too bad in that regard either. So it might work in a small yard space situation too for somebody looking for something real late and reliable. Um, it's yeah, I like it better than some of the old classic. It's better than like a Palmer or something.
Yeah.
So there's something that fruits around the same time period. So
Okay. Well, we're gonna take about 10 more questions before we finish everybody. And we're gonna go to the next question is, Does a program of rotating the spraying of different fungicides help mitigate the occurrence of mango bacteria black spot?
Yeah, but you got to use. I'm not going to get really into the details on this. You've got to use some different products and some expensive products. And I don't, from my own experience, I don't think it's worth trying to control it chemically for backyarders or people with small orchards. And frankly, I don't think it's even necessarily worth trying to control chemically for larger orchards either. We've top worked out of existence a lot of the varieties that were prone to bacterial black spot. Now we still have a spray protocol for the existing trees that we've kept around that are prone to it. Um, but you got to start with a strong copper fungicide and you got to use some non-copper fungicides, okay, that are indicated against bacteria. Beyond that, I'm not going to get into any further details on product recommendations. That's kind of stuff that sometimes I'm doing consulting work for other growers on that topic, but like, um, yeah, I'll hold my tongue on the rest.
Okay. Uh, Andy says solution no solution for gummosis.
Gummosis.
Yeah. Question mark.
Um, okay, well, like it depends on what's causing the gummosis to begin with, okay? But if you're treating it, you want like I would think about getting like a good quality copper, and I'm not talking about the copper they sell at Home Depot and Lowe's. I'm talking about like copper with a metallic copper equivalent of more than 20%. And then you rotate it with something else, like chlorothalonil or manzate or something. You might be able to treat it with that. If it's taking more than that, then I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I would want to make sure the tree is nutritionally healthy. Make sure that it's getting a micronutrient spray every other month. Make sure that if it's past the point of receiving NPK fertilizer, at least make sure it's receiving potassium. And if you can get like a granular or drenching micronutrient product, you might try that as well to help keep the tree healthy from a nutritional standpoint. Um, you know, that's it. That's all I can say. You hopefully, if you have to treat the area with a product, you shouldn't have to do it for more than a few months. If it keeps reoccurring, then the tree has some pretty serious health problems.
Okay. So for the next questions, maybe we'll do like a speed round so we can try to fit some more in, maybe.
Okay.
Uh, when does the fruit tree planting season end in zone 9B?
Well, 9B, where? If we're in Florida, you can still plant them now. Uh, it doesn't necessarily end. Um, but if you're concerned about freezes and frosts or whatever, then maybe don't plant after November. You're going to have to protect from a freeze or frost regardless of when you plant the tree. But of course, it's easier to take a potted tree indoors. 9B hardly ever sees any freezes and frosts these days, it seems. Although some people I know are going to jump in and say that they've experienced some in the last few years. But um, I mean, we've planted mango trees in the winter. Obviously, we're not in 9B, we're in 10B now, I guess. But um, if you have a plan to protect them with a little cover or something, if there might be a frost or freeze, you're good to go. Otherwise, if you want to wait until the risk is totally gone, you can wait until mid-March to plant. So they're not going to grow much this time of year anyway. You're not gaining that much.
What are the prettiest mango varieties? I was just talking about this today in my video that I lost.
Okay, here's a few. Like the one behind me right there is beautiful, right? That's Zill 80. Spirit of 76 is beautiful. Irwin, Tahar, which I actually no longer grow, but it was beautiful mango. Mag Shamim, the Israeli mangoes are all beautiful. Naomi, um, beautiful mango. Um, but yeah, Spirit of 76 is a beauty. Winters, absolutely gorgeous fruit. Gorgeous fruit. Vianato is real pretty. Um, Hodson is beautiful. What else? And then like, we're talking about mangoes like with a lot of red, crimson blush. Oh, Crimson Delight, by the way, is a beautiful mango. But then there's some that don't really turn red, but like turn really beautiful pastel colors and stuff like that too. Like White Puri, when it gets real nice sun exposure and everything, is a real pretty fruit. ST Maui is beautiful. Super Julie is can get really nice color. Real nice color. Really nice, brilliant shades of orange. Um, what are some other real pretty ones?
Sunrise.
Sunrise
Yeah.
can be real nice color. Um,
Uh, and somebody mentioned, Mark mentioned the Glen. That's pretty nice.
yeah, Glens can be beautiful. Absolutely. Talk about ones that can get real nice pastel colors. Glens can really get that, like they can look like the mango behind you in your background photo, Paul, but also you can get like some pinks and a lot going on at once. But I find beauty in even simple yellow mangoes sometimes too. Mangoes, perhaps more than any fruit in the world, are one of the most visually appealing fruits.
Hogsall's
It's really
beautiful.
incredible.
Hogsall beautiful.
Hog
Yeah.
absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I tell people don't plant your beautiful mangoes up front because that's a nice
yeah.
people want to
Oh,
grab
they'll
it all.
steal the ugly ones too, believe me.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay, how does Zill 318 compare to Sugarloaf? And how does 4017 compare to other Gary citrus like Seacrest, Orange Essence, and Peach Cobbler?
Okay. 318 does not taste like Sugarloaf. It's got coconut going on, but like 318 to me is a lot more like uh 318 is like the coconut you find in the Julie mango. Not to say it tastes like it is a Julie seedling, by the way, but it's that coconut is almost a distinct kind of coconut flavor from the kind that you find in the Gary Pettigrew descendants. Although 318 itself is probably a hybrid of the Julie and the Gary, but whatever. Um, 318 tastes closer to 4017 than it does to the Sugarloaf. Now, 4017 to me is very similar to the Gary mango. You can taste citrus in it some days, and some days you can taste coconut. Um, And what was it like? How does it compare to the other ones? Oh, it's right up there with them in terms of flavor. 4017 is outstanding. 318 is outstanding. These are like elite, high quality mangoes that are not really outclassed by anything. Um, Neither tree has produced a lot of fruit for us so far, and I think part of that has to do with just perhaps creating too many male flowers when they flower. We get fruit from both of them for several years in a row now. Um, I do wonder if 318 will get anthracnose issues out west because I've observed some anthracnose on it over here. So, as amazing as some of these things are, if you try to grow them, beware. You don't know what you're going to find because there's really hardly any examples of these out there that I have heard about. We've certainly sold trees of both of these over the last few years. Not a ton because like they're numbered varieties, so the amount of interest is kind of limited. But yeah, I mean, in terms of eating quality, they're both like outstanding mangoes. And I wish that more people had gotten to try them. I've tried to sample them out to people where I've had the opportunity to. Um, Both are slow growing trees, dwarfish, to be honest with you. I think probably they're dwarf type trees, based on how they've grown both in the ground and in the nursery setting. So like the grafted potted 4017s and 318s have grown pretty slowly. And the limited amount of reports I've had from other people suggest that they're pretty slow growing trees for them as well. So, well, that's a plus, of course, for most people.
Okay. Somebody wants to know, can I buy off-season fruit from you like Mamey or Sapodilla?
I don't sell my Mamey fruit currently because I need every single seed for rootstock. Sapodilla, um, I usually will hold on to the first month or two of sapodilla fruit for also for rootstock, but we do typically sell some amount of our sapodilla fruit in the spring. But you have to contact us directly because we don't have tons and tons of it like we do with mango. So we usually don't advertise the fact that we have it. People call and we say, yeah, we have some, like a few pounds, right, on a given day. But yeah, we will sell some sapodilla come springtime.
Okay. Somebody said they have 10 mango trees in 15-gallon pots and they plan to put them in the ground in about a year. In the meantime, what type of fertilizer should they use?
If they're in 15-gallon pots, depends on how big they actually are, because like in a 15-gallon pot, you might have a tree that's really more appropriately belonging in a 3-gallon pot, right? But it also could be that they're substantially large trees and like if they're decent size, like true 15-gallon size trees, um, I'd probably I'd probably just give them a little bit of potassium sulfate and some micronutrients, um, in in a foliar form, and before planting them, because if they've got some size to them already, I don't necessarily want to egg them on with nitrogen. But if they're like undersized 15-gallon trees that are like more like 3 or 7-gallon size trees or whatever, then you can just give them NPK, like palm tree type fertilizer. But it, I don't, without looking at them and without it being contained in the description, I don't know how big they are. So.
Okay. Do you have any mango recommendation for Hawaii? And they said I've seen Kent Graham and Manzanella flower here, but I'm concerned about my new varieties, Honeykiss, Ceci Love, Sugarloaf, Pickering, and Sunpuri.
Well, when you say you're concerned about them, are you concerned with? What was the first part of the question? You said with
Any
it.
recommendations for Hawaii?
Okay, so I've never grown mangoes in Hawaii. Okay, I've only gotten like feedback from people who have. Um, the big thing is what part of Hawaii you're in, because if you're in the rainy side of the island versus, the drier side, it can make a substantial difference in terms of what you can get to fruit there. Because some varieties are a little too fungal prone, right? To be grown in the wetter sides of the islands. But if you're in the dry side, the good side, as they'll say, then you know you can probably be a little more aggressive in what varieties you try out there. We don't get a lot of feedback from Hawaii. Like there's not a lot of participation by people in Hawaii growing mangoes in the um, you know, mango community, if you will. It's unfortunate because Hawaii has a lot to offer as far as mango culture is concerned. Um, so it's tough for me to make recommendations. I believe CAC does well in Hawaii. So that one I'm pretty sure. I think Maha Shinnok does well in Hawaii, I think I've been told. Uh, I mean, Hayden is common in Hawaii, so if Hayden does well there, most of the Florida mangoes should do okay, at least in the drier sections. In the wetter sections, you're going to want to be more concerned about disease resistance. So, what else can I say? I wish more Hawaiians would participate in, you know, the mango community here, that we have online, right? Not just you and me, but like on Facebook, there's all these mango groups now, and almost all the posts are people from Florida with a little sprinkling of people from other states, and other countries, but almost no participation from Hawaii, and that's disappointing because I know you've got a lot of mangoes there, and Hawaiian mangoes, interestingly enough, do well in Florida. Very well in Florida. We have a number of Hawaiian varieties in our own collection here. So,
We did
yeah,
a video on it. We did a video on
did
Hawaii
that's right. Yeah.
mangoes. So check that out on the channel, everyone. And I am coming up this week with a video, conversation with a Hawaii grower who came to visit me and
Okay, cool.
took a bunch of mangoes from here back there. But it was a
Oh,
good
neat.
conversation. All
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
we're gonna take three more questions. I'm trying to not let it go too late. But next time we do this a live Q&A, everybody, you can get those questions in beforehand, so you're first on the list. And but I appreciate you all being here. And I will tell you that I'm going to try to the second week, the second Sunday night of every month. I'm going to try to do a Q&A with a fruit tree growing expert. And so keep that in mind, mark your calendars and get those questions in. So three more questions tonight will be, let's see. There were a bunch of comments. Thank you everybody for the comments. As for questions, okay, here's a good one. How long are scions valuable when shipped?
Okay, it depends on what kind of scion. Mango scions, if they're wrapped properly, and harvested and shipped in relatively quick fashion, are usually good for at least a week without any refrigeration. Now, if you want to extend their life, their longevity, you can do so by refrigerating them as long as they're not exposed to freezing temperatures. But if they're kept in moist media in refrigeration, mango scions can last several weeks. Okay. Avocado scions not don't last as long, unfortunately. Same thing with Mamey and Sapodilla. They don't have quite the longevity. So like you're a week at most, right? Um, my recommendation is that get them grafted as soon as you can once you receive them. Now, when we ship them via FedEx Express, and so if they're within Florida, they usually arrive overnight. If they're in another state or in different parts of Florida, they might take 2 days. That kind of time span, there's no issue really with the viability of the budwood. You're talking about just a matter of days, and it's being kept in moist media. And they're almost always perfectly fine at that point in time. So,
Right? Would you rather grow a Taylor or a Lula avocado? Or Tyler?
Taylor or Lula, I would rather go Lula. I think Lula is a better tasting avocado. It's got a little better oil content, but much better size. The fruit is bigger. Um, yeah, I mean, I like Lula better than Taylor makes an amazing amount of fruit, though. I will say that. And there's people that really like the Taylor. Um, but I just personally, between the two, I would pick the Lula.
Okay. And favorite Indian mango.
Favorite Indian mango? Probably San Peri. I really like Imam Passan and Panchdara Colasso, though. Those two are awesome. Um, but you know what? I might have to go back on that, though. I think my favorite Indian mango might be Mahmood Vikarabad now. Mahmood Vikarabad is mind-blowingly good. And it's every bit as good as San Peri. It might be just a little better just because it's a little more unique. I don't know. San Peri is awesome too, though. So those are my favorite Indian mangoes, though, so far. Um, I'm gonna change my mind. I'm gonna say Mahmood Vikarabad is my favorite mango from India.
Today.
What's that? Yeah, today,
Today.
exactly. So tomorrow it
Okay.
might be tomorrow it might tomorrow it might be Borsha or something or Raspberry or I don't know. India's got so many amazing mangoes, and
Uh, yeah.
I can't wait to grow more of them because, I know we will in the future. So,
Okay. Zaddy had a question about is 417. Do you think you need it? If you have the 417, do you need a 318?
they're different enough from one another to say that they don't taste identical. 318 last year or this year, my wife and I were eating one, and I shared this story at the Mango festival when we were doing the panel discussion. This fruit tasted like a chicha, which is like this coconut flavored drink that they have in Venezuela, which is the country that my wife is from. I mean, it's got like coconut and cinnamon going on, and other things. I'm not so terrific at describing them, but 318 and 4017 can both taste like coconut, but 4017 has a citrus element to it. A citrus element. So it's like similar to mangoes like peach cobbler and Gary itself very much has a citrus flavor. So they're not identical. They have that coconut element to them both, but um, you know, is it closer than, let's say, comparing 318 to like coconut cream or something like that? Yes, 318 is a little closer to 4017, but there's enough of a difference that you would taste the difference.
Okay, and the last thing I want to do is ask you questions about the Mango Festival next year. Anything you want to say about it at this time, or just stay
Okay,
tuned for information? What
we're definitely planning to do the Mango Festival again, and we want to make it bigger and better. We are driven to make sure that this thing is successful. We want more participation, and we want everybody that wants to go, to be able to get a ticket. One of the most difficult things for both Paul and myself this last year was all the people that reached out to us wanting to go to this event and they could not because of the cap on the tickets that was placed due to the venue. We're going to make sure that that cap doesn't happen again. And how we accomplish that remains to be seen, but it will be done. So we will certainly plan to do the Florida Mango Festival again, and we're going to look to make improvements to it in every way, shape, and form that we're able to. And myself and Paul and all the other growers that are involved, and we want to involve more of them. We want as many mango growers in Florida participating with us in this event as possible. But we're going to all work together to make this event special and make it worth your while. We had tremendously positive feedback on the event this last year, and we're very encouraged by that. But we're not going to rest on our laurels. We're going to make sure that we make this event bigger and better, and I'm confident that's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm excited to definitely start promoting it as soon as we have all the plans set. So stay tuned for that, everybody. Alex, thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to put his links below. Definitely keep updated. Follow him on social media and his channel and everything, so you know what's happening. Anything you want to share before we end, Alex?
Um, I'm going to be traveling this coming week up to Washington, D.C. To go to a facility that the USDA has in Maryland to review an old archive of the U.S. plant introduction records. This was covering the time when they were introducing mangoes to the United States in the late 19th and early 20th century. So this is some pretty interesting material from a historical perspective and a horticultural perspective. So I thought I'd bring that up. Um, I'm going to have some access to the archive there, which I'm thankful for, and we'll see if I, discover some neat material. I suspect I will. I have reviewed some of these historical archives before over at Fairchild at the Montgomery Center, um, but this is kind of an even larger collection, I believe, and lots of old documents from dating back to David Fairchild's days and so forth. So just something worth noting and bringing up, and we'll see what I encounter. Maybe we can do a video about it or something.
Absolutely, absolutely. Everybody, if you want a topic for me and Alex to discuss, or something to show you on the farm, just put them in the comments below the video. I will be saving this video under the live videos on this YouTube channel. And in 2 weeks, well, actually the second week of next month, we'll have another guest and we'll be doing another live Q&A. So thank you, Alex, Tropical Acres Farms, and thank you everybody for watching. Have a great night, everybody, and thank you. Okay. All right, good. We finished that.
Cool.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem.